All right, so thanks for coming to my workshop on conflict resolution. I'm going to start by asking, what are some emotions that you guys feel when you get stressed out or face conflict?
Uncomfortable?
Nervous?
Sweaty palms.
Yeah, and all of those are valid feelings to feel. So with keeping that in mind, I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is on the ABC model of stress. So the A stands for activator, which is the expected or unexpected life event that you face. And then B is the set of beliefs that you have as a result of that event. And then the C stands for consequences, which are things like sweaty palms, heart rate rising, anything that comes from that initial event of stress. And so by understanding the steps of this model, hopefully you familiarize yourself with what stage you could be at if you're encountering stress. You could better understand yourself. So the next slide, if you wanted to click next, is figuring out your own signs of anxiety and stress. So this is where self-awareness plays a key role in understanding, am I feeling stressed, am I anxious? And some signs of that are heightened breathing, heart rate increases, stomach discomfort, maybe you cry, maybe you feel hot and sweaty. All of those are signs of it. So for the next slide, I wanted to go over a way to combat these feelings of stress. So on the next slide, it'll be about the activities approach. And this approach is pretty much finding an activity or a hobby that calms you down. So it could be exercise, getting enough rest, having a consistent sleep schedule, creating art, being outdoors, but having exercise in your life is the best way to combat stress. All right, and for the next slide, I wanted to ask you guys, what are some activities that help you alleviate your own stress?
Stretching?
Stretching,
Running?
running, that's a good
Taking
one.
a walk.
Taking a walk,
Being outside.
being outside. That's a good one. Those are all good. Being outside and being physical is especially the best way to help that. So those are really good options. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is self-talk. So it's pretty much what the name of it is, just how you speak to yourself. And the first step to correcting this is just noticing that you're having negative thoughts or that you're putting yourself down so that way you can change it and make it more positive. Because being negative about yourself will never help the situation. So a way to combat this is by taking phrases such as, I'll never find a job, and saying, this was a good learning experience instead. So just learning to flip it and see the bright side of it. All right, so for the next slide, we're going to talk about this self-talk role play. So I'm going to hand out some cards that are describing negative situations, and then you're going to learn to put it in a positive light. That'll be your job. And we'll go around. Here we go. There you go. And that's for you, Cassie. Look around. I'll give you this one. All right, so these cards all have things that happened that were negative, and your job is to learn how to make it positive. So we're gonna go around, you'll read your original card and then say what you turned it into. Whenever you're ready, you can shout it out.
You got a speeding ticket, so I would say turning around by slowing down, maybe learning from it, not to speed.
That's a good way to look at it, just learn from the experience.
When you fail the test, I think you should start like studying.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So if you failed something, then just, you know what you did right and you know what you did wrong, and just work towards doing better next time. It's a good one.
You didn't receive the Employee of the Year award. So that just means that I have to do better in maybe certain areas to be able to maybe get that award next year.
Yeah, that's good, being open to criticism.
You got into a car accident.
Maybe that it would be next time you could try to be more aware of your surroundings.
Drive carefully.
And drive more carefully. Yeah, that's a good one
Drive
too.
carefully.
Exactly.
Your bag got stolen.
Uh-oh.
Oh. Replaced it.
You just replace it and just be
Another-
better next time. Just keep your eyes on it. Yes. Exactly. Good job. So that was a good exercise, just kind of showing you how to look at the positive side of a negative situation. So the next slide I have is a quote. And it says, energy is required to get the need of expressing anger met. Anger, however, co-opts our energy by directing it towards punishing people rather than meeting our own needs. So pretty much what this means is when we get angry and we have those emotions, we're putting energy into feeling angry, when instead we could put that energy into being proactive and actually getting to meet our needs and a common goal. So on the next slide, it talks about active listening, which is a key part to controlling our anger. So by active listening, you're listening to understand, not to respond. So when someone's talking to you, you're just listening to them to understand what they're trying to say, instead of being ready to respond, and cut them off and put your feelings in. You just be patient and listen. And then you also just focus on redirecting your energy into the conversation and learning how to work things out. And then if emotions are too heightened, maybe just take a pause and go your own ways and then reconnect at a later time. So the next slide, I'm going to talk about breathing exercises. It's on the next one. Perfect. So deep breathing is known to help calm our bodies and minds when we're in stress situations. So there are various breathing exercises that you could do, but there's one that I wanted us to all try, which is called the box breathing method. So pretty much it's you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, and then hold again for 4 seconds. So we can all try this together if you guys would like. So I'm gonna inhale. And then exhale. And then hold for 4 seconds. Perfect. And that's a really good method to use. I've personally used it even before taking this class, and it's always helped me out. And yeah, so I would recommend that for sure if you're ever feeling anxious, angry, any heightened emotions, or even just before bed if you want to relax. It's a great breathing exercise. So for the next slide, I'm going to get to talking about conflict management and conflict resolution, and then also effective conflict management. So conflict management is defined as the communication behavior one has based on their evaluation of a situation. But effective conflict management occurs when the communication behaviors utilized help to find a common understanding that's agreeable and beneficial for all involved. And then resolution is when the parties involved seek to solve the issue for good, to completely stop it pretty much. So the next slide, I'm going to talk about the STLC system, which gets into this conflict management a little bit more. So STLC stands for Stop, Think, Listen, and Communicate. So this pretty much is set up to help alleviate interpersonal conflict between two people. So let's start with stop. So you click next. Okay, so stop is a crucial starting point for this whole system. It's pretty much the point where you stop the conversation, to take a step away, or to just come back to the conversation altogether at a different time. This is a good thing to do because if emotions are heightened during the conversation, it lets everyone cool down and it prevents anyone saying anything they don't mean or making the conflict worse. So some options are to get a glass of water, do some breathing exercises like we talked about, take a walk outside, or change the topic temporarily. Okay, and then the next slide, we'll talk about think, which is the T. So this part is just thinking about the root cause of the conflict and considering the potential outcomes of when you solve it. So there's 4 ways to solve it, or options. The first is do nothing and live with the situation. The second is to try and change yourself. The third is try to change the other person, and then finally try to change the solution. And you want to be creative when you're thinking about how to go about either one of those options. And so for the next slide, we're going to talk about the L, which is listen. So just practice active listening. Be open to receiving criticism. Try not to be defensive. Practice listening cues such as nodding your head, saying just kind of anything vocally or non-verbally that you can do to let the other person know that you're listening. And the next slide, we'll talk about the C and STLC, which stands for communicate. So in this part, you want to have assertive communication. So you want to make sure that you're listening to the other person and validating what they feel while also being assertive about your own beliefs. So just making sure not to minimize what they've been through. And then you also want to make sure just to be cooperative and having mutual respect. All right, so for our next exercise, some directions there. These are it. So I'm going to pass out some cards, and on these cards there's going to be some things that, wrong exercise. So for this exercise, they're actually going to be right here on the screens. So the first example I'll go through with you guys. So it's on the right ones. An exercise. There we go. So for this one, I'm going to read it aloud. So I'm going to read a situation, then you're going to tell me what part of the STLC system the person's at. Perfect. So Carly is journaling about the argument she's had with her friend Tara at lunch. While journaling, Carly lists out the potential causes of the argument to help her understand the situation. What step in this STLC system is Carly currently in? By journaling, is she stopping, is she thinking, listening, or communicating?
Stopping.
Any other
Yeah.
ideas too? She's journaling.
She's thinking.
Thinking, sorry.
Yeah, I think it could be both of those.
Mhm.
I think that one's definitely stopping and thinking. So she's listing out the potential causes, looking at the roots of the communication. So she's reflecting on it and thinking about it by journaling. Perfect. If you want to click next, we'll have another scenario to look at. This one reads, Sarah is having an argument with her mom and tells her that she needs to go to her room. Sarah then goes upstairs to her room and takes some deep breaths to help calm herself. What step in the STLC system is Sarah currently in?
Stop.
Stop. Perfect. Yeah, Sarah stopped herself and let her mom know, I need to go upstairs. She needs some time. And by doing that, she was alleviating it getting worse or heightened and just taking some time to herself to take deep breaths. All right. And the next exercise says, Ken is having a conversation with his friend Sam about canceling the road trip last minute. Although Ken felt bad about having to cancel last minute, he feels as though Sam is not being considerate of his reasoning for canceling. Therefore, Ken arranged to meet with Sam. When they meet, Ken begins by apologizing for cancellation before he gives Sam the floor to vent. What step in the STLC system is Ken currently in? This is a wordy one. But pretty much he's sitting down with him to talk about things.
Communicating.
Communicating, exactly. So he's in that final step of just talking about what happened and reflecting, and he gives him the floor to talk about how he feels. All right, so the next slide is going to be about defensiveness. So defensiveness is a big challenge when facing conflict because a lot of us become defensive when we hear anyone say anything that we don't exactly agree with or that catches us off guard or that offends us, any criticism. So by overcoming defensiveness and just learning, again, when you're kind of putting your guard up, you can learn to combat it to have better conflict resolution. So this is important because defensiveness could lead to miscommunication, anger, or block listening. Some people just stop listening after the part of criticism about them and don't hear anything after it, and that also leads to more miscommunication. So a way to combat this is by saying I statements. Instead of being like, you did this, I would say, I felt uncomfortable when you did this. And I would start with I to kind of bring the point of interest back to myself instead of attacking you. So that's how I statements work. So for the next slide, I'm going to go over a defensiveness role-playing activity. And this one's the one with cards. So I'm going to pass these out, but first I'm going to go over the example. So let's say I got the card that says, "You are so immature." I would switch it and make it an I statement by saying, "I don't like your attitude." And that would be the way that I switch that to be less defensive and more I focused. So we'll start over here. There's that one. Here's your card. Over here. There's yours. There's yours. All right. So take a moment to think about how you could flip these cards, these statements, to be less attacking and more I statement. Less defensiveness. E. A little tip to help change it is you could just say, "I feel uncomfortable," or "I felt upset when," and then the thing that happened.
Anything.
Okay, so I would say I felt upset when you don't pick up your socks, or it makes me upset.
Yeah.
Say that.
Yeah, I think with I statements, you want to start with an I, but as long as it's not beginning with you, that's pretty much the gist of it, just having it sound less attacking. So that's a good way to put it. How about you, Lena?
You never say sorry. I think you don't say sorry.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Just putting more like "I feel like" or "I don't think" is a good way to start it. How about
You're so lazy. So I would say, "I don't like it when you are lazy."
Being lazy.
Or you're being lazy, or when you don't pick up your shoes,
Yeah.
or when you don't
Yeah,
pick
or
up your
maybe "I don't
clothes,
feel supported,"
or
or something like that.
yeah.
Yeah, sometimes even changing the word that could be offensive is a good idea too. But yeah, you're on the right track.
Okay.
You never plan anything without me having to tell you.
Maybe it could be, "I feel like I have to plan everything." Would be a good way to put it. Okay,
You're
that's a good one.
driving me crazy. Like
It could be, "I feel very
I feel-
overwhelmed."
overwhelmed.
Yeah, that's a good
Yes.
one. Taking the blame off that other person, owning your emotions in a way that doesn't attack them.
Yes.
Exactly.
We don't point them back out.
Exactly. Trying not to shift the blame around, just kind of trying to be general about how you feel. That's a good way to put it. All right. So the next slide is going to be about the 6-step confrontation process. And so this process is an effective way to also combat conflict with another person. And it starts with preparation, which just means identifying the needs. So if you're in an argument with someone, just kind of outlining what you would need to move on from the situation and to fix it. And the second step would be to arrange a time and place to meet with that person or that party you have the conflict with. Then you would actually have that discussion with them and discuss the issue and ways to, come back together. And fourth, another very important point is to consider the other person's point of view. So while you're discussing with them your own needs, also making sure that you're balancing it by considering their point of view and their feelings. Fifth would be to resolve the issue. So coming to a mutual agreement that benefits both parties, utilizing that effective conflict management in the discussion is a good way to combat it and finally come to a solution. And the sixth would be to follow up. So set a time for a reevaluation to make sure that things are okay, and I'll go more into the idea of reconciliation in just a second with the next slide. So you guys wanted to click forward. So this one's going to be about forgiveness and reconciliation, the kind of final step to seal conflict management. So forgiveness is defined as a cognitive process that involves letting go of grudges and feelings of retaliation. So once you've let go of those feelings of hurt and whatever you may have gotten from the conflict, it is forgiveness. And there's a 4-step process to it. There's hurt, there's hate, healing, and then coming together. And according to the textbook by Conn and Abigail, forgiveness is linked to big mental and physical health benefits. So it's important not only for the moment and the relationship you may have with that person, but also just for you, yourself, and your own well-being. And then reconciliation is defined as the process of taking action to restore a relationship or create a new one altogether. So this step is more optional. It depends on whether you do want to reconciliate with this person or if you're okay with just having forgiveness. But if you do want to reconciliate, genuine forgiveness is an important first step towards that. And for the final slide, I'll conclude my workshop by summarizing what we talked about, which is to first become self-aware and familiar with your own signs of anxiety, stress, and anger, and then to figure out ways to alleviate those feelings. And then managing your anger by practicing deep breathing, using the activities approach, and then also figuring out what systems work for you. If the STLC system works for you, if the 6-step confrontation process works for you, then try utilizing those in your own personal experiences with conflict. And then be open to accountability and forgiveness. That's the best way to ultimately seal the conflict. And then reconciliation is also an option after, if you decide so. And then with that, I end my workshop. Thank you for listening. Thank you. All good.